Hi, I'm Rob from B&H, and in this video we're going to test drive Native Instruments' flagship groove production system, Maschine Studio. The Studio version of the Maschine hardware is the largest and most expensive version of the Maschine hardware controllers, and it ships with the 2.0 version of the software, which sees some significant improvements. Now, if you're not familiar with the Maschine concept, basically the hardware functions as a USB control surface for the software, which runs on a Mac or PC. The software can work in standalone mode or within a DAW like Logic or Ableton Live. As long as your DAW runs VST, AU, or AAX plugins, you're in good shape. We tried it out in Logic Pro X running Mavericks, and it worked very well. Once installed, you can actually disconnect the hardware controller and the software will still run if, for example, you've already programmed your parts and you're in a mix situation. If you've been using the Maschine 1 software, you will have to pay to upgrade to Maschine 2, but of course version 2 will run happily on NI's original Maschine and the Maschine Micro. With the upgrade, the look of the program has been overhauled and browsing has been greatly improved, and tagged browsing is now on board. Unlimited groups and plugins are now available, as well as 5 new drum synth plugins and additional features, including the mix window with the plugin strip and improved sampling, looping, and effects. Tagged browsing is nice because in addition to the software and hardware, a major component in the Maschine system is the excellent 8 GB sound library, so there are a lot of sounds to navigate. The list of stuff is extensive and includes 445 different drum kits, 669 presets, 403 sliced loops, 8,627 one-shot drum hits, and 23 effects to process the sounds. 4 instruments and effects from NI's complete library are also included. Massive, a very fat-sounding virtual synth designed for bass and leads, the Reaktor Prism synth, the Scarby Mark I electric piano, and the solid Bus Compressor. Maschine also integrates very nicely with other Native Instruments plugins if you want to use other elements of the Komplete family with it, and you can also run third-party VST or AU plugins as well. 38 entire projects are included. Let me play a couple of examples of those to give you an idea of the Maschine library. For programming parts, the Maschine Studio hardware is quite impressive. The chassis feels very solid, includes 2 integrated kickstands, and gets power from a wall wart power supply. The star players are the 16 backlit multicolored velocity-sensitive pads that feel great to play and look fantastic. And the colors, of course, give you information about what the pads are doing and how they're grouped. A row of buttons to the left works with the pads for navigation and editing and includes mute and solo buttons for the groups. Another deluxe touch are the 2 very nice, large, high-resolution color displays, but of course you can also get information from your computer screen as well. Buttons above the screens allow for quick navigation around parameters and settings, which are then adjusted with the 8 endless encoder knobs below. On the lower left are the transport controls with the brightly colored groups selection buttons. Just above those are some performance control buttons, including the note repeat button and the step programming mode. On the lower right portion of the controller is the Edit section, featuring dedicated buttons for editing patterns and events that also includes a multifunction jog wheel that you can use to scrub through a song, scroll through lists in browse mode, and adjust the tuning, swing, and volume. Now, to be frank, I hadn't spent a lot of time with Maschine prior to playing with the studio version for this review, so I wanted to see how intuitive it is for a Maschine newbie like myself to come up with a little groove, and the workflow felt pretty good, and obviously I'd get faster with practice. I loaded up a couple of the groups from the Maschine library, some kits with kicks and snares and hats to groups A and B, and programmed a couple of patterns with them by turning the metronome on, playing the parts, quantizing them, and adding a little swing. By hitting Shift and Quantize, you only quantize the grid to 50%, which can help your tracks from feeling too metronomic. And of course, I can edit those MIDI events, and the two screens on Maschine Studio give me a larger view on the left and a more close-up view on the right, which makes editing easier. The biosynthetic kit I put on Group C has some interesting sounds. The blip bio, for example, is generated from the snare drum synth that's new in Maschine 2.0. Right now, it's set to the bit engine, but if I change the engine, I can get a completely different character out of it, and when you do that, different parameters become available on the screen. You can also see that after the drum synth, there's some additional effect plugins, the maximizer, a plate reverb, and a beat delay, and the parameters for them all show up over the encoder knobs for quick adjustments. Having two screens makes it easier to get to parameters quickly, and I liked how at the bottom I can see that I'm looking at page 1 of 2, and this arrow button also smartly lights up to let me know that there's a second page of parameters I can access. Keep in mind that in addition to effects on individual sounds, I can put effects on the group as a whole. Also in this kit, I triggered the kettle bio sound, which is generated by the percussion drum synth, and loaded up with a delay, verb, and phaser effect chain. I liked this filter sound effect as well, so I used the MPC style note repeat button to trigger that sound. When you hold the note repeat button down, you can adjust the timing of the repeat with the knobs. That's very intuitive. On the E group is a little conga action, while F has some very vinyl sounding kick and snare gems I really liked, while group G has a little low end accent. I wanted to try a melodic bass line, and one of the sounds on the console kit on Group D, Carbon, sounded promising, and I discovered that by hitting the keyboard icon, I could play the sounds melodically on the pads. Finally, I loaded Massive on Group H and did a quick little synth line with that also. Now, of course, Maschine is capable of much more than that admittedly primitive demo. I created maybe 1 or 2 patterns with each of the groups, but you can create multiple patterns in each group for variations. You can then use the pads to trigger those patterns, which is especially cool in a live performance situation. Groups of patterns called scenes can also be triggered by pads for live performances. I was switching between scenes with the pads when we heard some of the factory programs earlier. And of course, scenes can be strung together in the arrangement timeline to create entire compositions. The mix page is a convenient way to adjust the levels of the groups or of the individual sounds on the pads in the groups. Parameters and instruments and effects can also be automated, of course. Also cool is the ability to set up macro effect pages that will allow you to adjust parameters from different plugins all on the same page, and again, that's great for live performances. Now, I spent my time on Maschine using the included library, but of course you can import your own sounds into the groups, and you can also sample sounds without stopping the sequencer. Loops and samples can be sliced up and edited on the powerful sample editor. Also handy on Maschine Studio is the input-output section with great-looking meters and an easy-to-access volume knob, so you can quickly adjust the volume for the master, a group, a sound, the cue mix, or input levels. Keep in mind, though, that Maschine Studio is a controller, not an audio interface. I simply used the MacBook Pro's built-in audio engine and just plugged a pair of headphones into it, but of course you'll get much better sound quality from a good audio interface, both for playing back sounds and for sampling on Maschine. Not a lot of negatives with Maschine Studio. It's a bit large and heavy for some, but frankly, that's part of the appeal. You really feel like you're working on a serious piece of gear. And if you want something smaller, you could choose the original Maschine or the Maschine Micro instead. Navigating some aspects of the software can be a bit confusing at first. Sometimes I actually felt like I was driving a Rolls-Royce with a learner's permit, but with practice I started getting better. Sometimes I'd find it faster or easier to do something on the computer itself rather than the controller, but again I think most of that comes down to practice. Maschine really is an instrument, and like any instrument, you need to spend time with it to get really good, and I certainly have a ways to go. In general, Maschine 2.0 is a very powerful piece of software with a terrific sounding library, great for hip-hop, dance, pop, electronic music, and more. And the Maschine Studio hardware is an outstanding controller to work with. It certainly took me to creative places that I wouldn't have gone with anything else, which is pretty high praise for any device. I'm Rob from B&H, and thanks for watching.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.